Hello, Squirrel Army. How's it going for today? In today's one, we are discussing how do you composite your Pokemon team. So this is an issue we all face whenever we're playing through Pokemon, no matter whether you're playing a Nuzlocke or not, because sometimes when you're playing a Nuzlocke, you think to yourself, well, how can I composite my team when I have so few options? Well, you can still composite your team. So I'm going to give you a few tips, about 5 tips here, on how you can composite your team, no matter if you're doing a Nuzlocke or whatnot. If you're enjoying the content here, you can join the Squirrel Army by subscribing. So one of the first tips that I would say to do when you're trying to composite a team is to know what you're up against. Because so many people go into games, and sometimes, especially with new games, it's a lot harder. But again, knowing what you're going to be up against most of the time really helps you out. Because if you go, okay, cool, I am going to get the grass starter or whatever, I'm going to get the water starter, or I'm going to get the fire starter, whichever starter you start with, your rival's going to have one of the other two for the most part. So if the game is quote-unquote easy, they're going to get the one that is weak to your starter for the most part. Now, that's not always the case, and they've kind of tried to rebalance some of those things to have super effective damage against some of the other type or whatnot that you get, because you often get a secondary typing in these games and whatnot. So that does help out those matchups and whatnot later on in the game, but it's still one of those things. For the most part, you will have that advantage over them to be like, well, I've got the type advantage, so, hey, I don't need to worry as much, but still, hey, well, wait a minute. If I fight them early on in the game, they're probably not going to have much, so yes, I might, well, the first battle, let's say, hey, I'm probably fine for that if they've chosen the starter that is weak to mine. But if they've chosen the starter that is, super effective against mine, well, now I might have a bit of a problem to an extent. But at this point, well, do they actually have typed moves? Well, in the newest games they do, but in Diamond and Pearl, I don't think they did. And in Brilliant Diamond, Shiny Pearl, they definitely didn't. So having your starter and that have super effective damage against you, while you don't have any really effective damage against your opponent, is really hard. But it's one of those things. You go, okay, cool. I'm going to be up against something that is super effective against me the whole way through this game. So I want type coverage for that type, because I'm going to be seeing my rival throughout this whole game. So that is one thing that you can start going. But then you'll have to go even further, because you're, in theory, this isn't a real thing, but this is a thing that they program into the game, that your rival will know, hey, you're probably going to get something that's super effective against my starter Pokemon. So I've got to get something that will counter something that is super effective against my starter. And whatnot. So the game goes very much like that you go, okay, cool, I am having to go against my rival's team that has several different types in it throughout the game. And knowing what those types are, knowing what those Pokemon are, knowing how strong they are, and knowing how to counter them is a very good way to keep going through the game and not having too many problems. Again, same thing, knowing what gyms you're going to go against. In the newest games, you can choose which gyms you go against. So that makes it somewhat easier to be like, hey, well, I'll go against this gym because, hey, I've got a whole bunch of fighting types. So that's really going to help me out because it's a normal gym or whatever it is. Or I've got a whole bunch of electric Pokemon, so I can take the water gym pretty easily. So that's fine, or whatever it is. So again, or I don't really have a whole bunch of fire types, so I really can't take the grass gym, or bug types, or whatever it is. So I really can't take the bug gym or the grass gym right now. So knowing what to avoid, that sort of thing. Okay, cool, I've got to wait till I at least get a flying type, a fire type, or whatever, still I can take down the bug gym or take down the grass gym or whatever it is, or take down the grass uh, camp or whatever they're called, or the grass legend or whatever it is. So knowing again what you're up against, knowing where you're going to go. Same with the Elite Four, like, and the champion and whatnot. Okay, especially when you're going in there because you haven't got any other ability to change. Well, now in the newer games, you do have the ability to change your team between battles and whatnot. But in older games, you really didn't have that opportunity to change between battles. But yeah, again, in those older games, you don't have that option. So you've got to go, right, well, I need stuff to deal with Sydney or whatever it is. So I need to deal with dark types. Okay, cool. I need fighting or I need whatever types, basically fighting types to deal with those. Then I need, something for the ice one. Well, fighting types, again, pretty good there. Fire types, pretty good there, etc. Steel types, good there, blah, blah, blah. So you start going through it and going, okay, well, do I have enough things to counter the things that I really need to counter and don't really need to worry about, hey, this is weak to this. But, hey, wait a minute, I'm not even facing, this type. So why am I worried about this thing being weak to that? Well, I don't need to cover it because, hey, there aren't that many types of that, around where I'm going to be going. So it doesn't really matter that this is weak to that type because I'm just never going to see a significant enough threat for me to warrant worrying about it. So you need to know what type you are and what you're weak to, which is, I guess, tip number 2, super effectiveness. How effective is your Pokemon? How affected are you by other types? So you need to know type matchups and sometimes resistances and whatnot. I struggle with that sort of thing, but again, for the most part, I do know, okay, and even if the game does tell you, hey, this is super effective or not very effective, etc., that does help out. I know that some hand-holding some people don't like, but it does help you out when you go, oh man, I can't remember whether this is, resisted or it's just normal damage or whatnot, that sort of thing, especially that. That stumps me a lot, resistances. Like, I always know, oh, okay, yeah, that's super effective or whatever, or it's not very effective, mostly. But I don't know whether it's normally effective or not very effective or whatnot. So I always get stumped with that sort of thing. But again, that's pretty hard to sort of get through and get by without knowing sometimes. And having those little prompt reminders is sometimes like, oh, well, I don't really need to know when I'm going with my fire type against an ice type. Okay, cool. I know what's going on there. But, is bug, does rock actually resist bug or whatnot? I know rock is super effective against bug, but is bug, does rock resist bug? I know I know it isn't, but, is it normally effective or is it not very effective? So, yeah, that's where I get a little bit confused. But, when you get that little jolt to be like, oh, okay, now I can see it's not very effective or it's normally effective. So, I don't have to remember that. I just have to be like, able to read that, oh, well, it's not very effective. Even if it's my most powerful move, it's not going to be very effective. So even my move that is probably half as powerful, or even less sometimes, is going to be more effective because, hey, it's super effective. So it will do more. Especially things that lower defense or whatnot, and things like that, or lower special and things like that really do help out sometimes. So you can get by dropping those defenses lower, and suddenly now, oh, that thing that, even though it was super effective, wasn't doing much damage, well, now it's, paved the way for my other moves to be more effective. Even if they're not super effective, they're going to be more effective because the defense has dropped. So I can get through my damage more easily. Another little tip is to balance things. and sometimes balancing things for what you're facing. And that's where sort of that comes into play, is like, okay, you know what? I'm going to catch 5 Mankeys or whatever it is. I'm going to catch 5 fighting types to go up against this, normal gym. Or I've caught 5 fighting types to get into this normal gym. Or I just so happen to have 5 fighting types on my team for this normal gym. So diversity is really good for matchups where somebody's going to have a lot of different Pokemon for the most part, like the Elite Four, and for the champion, and for your rival. So those are times you want a diverse team, or for when you're just facing random trainers on route. But when you're going into a gym, for the most part, you want one type, because most of the Pokemon, if not all of the Pokemon, are going to share that type. So whether it's a normal gym, fighting gym, or whatever, you go, okay, cool. So I want most of my types to be a type that has super effective damage against this gym, so that I can just breeze through this gym, get to the next gym, so on and so forth. And I will keep 1 or 2 of those Pokemon around for later, when I need them to be, on my team, or the best ones on my team for when I'm just going about routes and going, well, I don't know what I'm going to run into. I really need, to cover as many bases as what I can. So, hey, this is going to be on my team while I'm running around and going from place to place to get the things that I need to do done to progress through the game. Another tip, I think this is the second last one, is knowing your reverse, essentially, super effectiveness. So, and type coverage. This is really important. Type coverage is super important. Like I was sort of saying earlier, if you know, hey, my thing is weak to psychic, my fighting type is weak to psychic, or my fighting type is weak to flying, etc., whatever. Okay, well, how many psychic types are there in the game? Or how many flying types are there in the game? Okay, there's heaps of flying types, and there's heaps of psychic types. Okay, so I really need to cover for both of those things. Okay, but it's also weak to water. Okay, because it's a fire fighting type. Alright, because there's so many fire fighting types. But, okay, but how many water types are there in this game? Okay, there are shit tons. Okay, well, if I have an electric move, that deals with both fire, flying, and water. So that covers 2 types. So that is much more useful to me than a thing that just deals with one type, essentially. Like, okay, I might be weak to ground also, but hey, that is a thing. But how many ground types are there in the game? Or how many Pokemon have ground moves? Okay, not that many. Yes, some, but not that many. And I really need to worry about these other types more so than what I need to worry about ground. Especially if your Pokemon is like Infernape or something, and you're just like going to go, cool, I outspeed everything and Oko everything. And it doesn't matter what you've got. So that is my game plan with that. That is a very good game plan and usually works out pretty well. So you don't need to worry about it per se. Some things, yes, have sturdy or whatever, so then you need to worry about it. But for the most part, when you can just run through everything, it's like, well, that didn't really affect me. I just ran through it all. So, like, that strategy doesn't always work because, again, there are damage rolls and things like that. But again, knowing what you have to cover for, or what you can cover for, because that's another thing. If your Pokemon can't learn an electric move, or can't learn whatever type move that it is that can help you get coverage, then you're just like out of luck, because, well, you can't get any coverage. So the only things then that you can do is figure out other strategies, or hope that your other team members can carry you threw it, you usually want to use those members that are strong against those types, but sometimes you come down to your last Pokemon and, well, you haven't got any other really good options. So it's like, well, now I've got to deal with what's in front of me, and I don't want to just give up and, lose this battle. So I want to try as hard as what I can. So I've got to have some answers for some things, because otherwise I do just lose. And then I have to come back later and go, well, now am I going to think about an answer, or am I just going to sit here and go, wow, cool, if it comes down to the same situation, well, I'm just screwed. Having an answer in your pocket and saying, well, I'm not going to use it or whatnot is just silly or whatnot. It's just like, you should go about it thinking, okay, cool, I need to counter this with this Pokemon. And hey, this can learn this move, so I might as well teach it to it so that I can, do something about the situation that I'm in. So knowing where and what to do is kind of difficult sometimes, but it is one of those things that you have to pick up. And that's pretty much the last one as well. Learning and developing through the gameplay. So everyone's going to make mistakes throughout, playing the game. I make them sometimes as well. I think I've captured a few of them on camera here and there and whatnot. But again, that's a learning experience. And sometimes you can't remember every single thing about every single Pokemon and every single battle, because there's just so much going on and there's always something else to think about. So, yes, some things just kind of flicker through the mind or whatnot, or, escape reality for a time being in your mind, and you just go, man, damn it, why did I forget that this is the way that this is, or whatnot. It's a fun game, and that's the way it should be, and everyone has their own way of playing it, but the strategy is one of those things that always comes down to it. There are some people that don't play with the strategy, and that is their way of doing it. That wouldn't be the way that I would want to do it, but hey, that is their way of doing it, and if they get success in that, then kudos to them. But hey, this is the way that I look at it. I look at it as if you've got to think about it. You don't have to look up, competitive guides or whatnot. You can just use the Pokemon that you like or whatever, but you need to know when it's good and where it's good and how to cover for it when it's not good, and if it can cover for itself when it's not good. Hence, like Shellos. You look at that Pokemon and go, well, its biggest weakness, pretty much its only weakness, is grass, like a lot of water and ground types are. How many grass Pokemon are there? Well, not that many. Not none, but not that many. So what do I need for grass types? Well, I need flying, ice, fire, or something, or flying, or whatever. So I need one of those types. Knowing that is at least half the battle, and going, okay, well, what can my Pokemon learn, and whatnot? What do I have access to? Is another step in that puzzle, and then going, okay, well, now it's time to implement that. And be able to, okay, cool, this is my only really good option, right now for this Pokemon, and it really helps it out and really helps me get through this bind, because otherwise I would just lose. So having that fallback and being like, well, it's not a perfect option, but at least it's there and I have it and I can do something about my situation if need be. Plus, it's fairly useful anyway for other things. Hey, look, if I give it an ice move, that'll deal with dragons. Oh, that also deals with flying, which is a fairly common thing, etc. So, it's really useful if you find things that are more, useful against more types, then those are the types of things to go for. Having a thing that is super effective against 2 or 3 types is much more valuable than something that is only super effective against 1 or super effective against none. no matter what for the most part, no, despite power and whatnot. Because normal moves, despite how powerful they are, aren't super effective against anything, so they're not very useful for anything for the most part. But that is what it is. Anyway, guys, I hope you have enjoyed this one. I hope it's been thought-provoking or helpful. And I hope to catch you in the next one.